Hi everyone! Today's video is a student interview with someone who studied off campus. So big thanks to the Financial Wellness Office as well as the Center for Global Programs / OCS office for sponsoring and for sharing the support of student stories. So feel free to just kind of watch this video all the way through, or I will also include the video timestamps. So if you have a particular question that you want to skip ahead to, you can do that too. So with that being said, please watch the rest of the video and enjoy.
My name is Mac. I'm a junior from Delaware, Ohio, and I went abroad to Bangor, Wales, Bangor University.
Great. And when did you go abroad as well?
I went abroad the fall semester of this academic year, so 2021, 2022.
Great, thank you. And then, so why did you pick your particular program and why did you want to study abroad in general?
You know, Bangor was not at all my first choice. My first choice was to go to South Africa, part of an IES program Denison partners with. And because of COVID, that was nullified entirely. So I went on my own search outside of Global Tools looking for an abroad program. And I found one at Portsmouth University in the south of the UK on the water. There was a really cool program with exercise science. I was very excited for it. And then I talked to Global Tools and the off-campus study uh, and tried to organize that. And they had never worked with the program before, so they wouldn't approve me to go there. And sure, it was frustrating. And I thought, man, I just want to go abroad. So I asked them, okay, where would you let me go abroad with all the circumstances of COVID, my
Yeah.
major, my GEs? And they said that Bangor University had an exercise science program they worked with and they liked and they trusted. And I said, all right, let's go to Bangor. And I started for South Africa and ended up in Wales. And it was an awesome decision. I loved every second of it. And I wanted to study abroad, partly because I am a global health major. So I wanted to get some global experience, but also because I knew that Denison is one type of college experience, and there's a whole plethora of college experiences that are out there. And I wanted to experience what it would be like abroad. And it was maybe one of the greatest decisions I ever made in my life to make that jump and go abroad.
Great. So when you were mentioning this whole like plethora of experiences, was there a particular class or just like something about being in the environment that you feel like really made you feel like, wow, like this is what, experiencing the world or kind of what I wanted to get from this experience is like?
Absolutely. So when I went abroad, I didn't want to just travel all over the place because I felt that wasn't diving into that university experience. That wasn't being a part of this program that I'm going to. I
Hmm.
wanted to get involved with the student body. So I went to their equivalent of the involvement fair and I saw all the clubs and I,
Nice.
talked to the theater and I talked to the gymnastics club, which I went to a few times. And then I just happened to walk by some guys throwing a rugby ball around, and I'd never touched a rugby ball in my life, never really learned about the sport. And they threw it my way, and it kind of bounced off my chest, and I threw it back. We got to talking, and they said you should just come out into a taster session, which is like a tryout.
Okay.
And I said, okay, yeah, I'll come, I'll show up. And that Tuesday, I went to the taster session, and I went back to the next one, and then I started going to the practices, and then I started going, out with the guys on the weekends, on the weekdays, and it was so much fun to be a part of a team where everyone had a different experience than I had. Everyone was from a different part of the UK. Everyone had a different accent despite being from the same country. It
Yeah.
was it was so cool to be with a group of guys like that in a really close setting. And I made a lot of really great friends in that way. And at the end of my abroad study, I actually stayed for the holidays over there, and I stayed with the rugby guys. So I bounced from house to house with the rugby guys. And had I not joined rugby, I probably would have come home early and had the holidays at home like normal. But instead, I got to have this super cool experience of being in Oakham for Christmas and being in London for a few days between New Year's and Christmas, and then ended up in Edinburgh on my own for New Year's, and I wouldn't have been able to do that hadn't been for the rugby team. So the best decision I made was going abroad and joining the student body and really diving into those connections, like you would here at Denison,
Yeah.
and I got so much out of it.
That's really cool to hear, yeah, because I definitely talked to some people who went abroad and they told me that they felt like it was hard to kind of integrate into the culture there, kind of meet some like local
Hmm.
students. And so it's really neat to hear that you were able to do that through going to an involvement fair and getting involved
Right.
in the club.
And going off of that sentiment, I think I totally never felt culture shock. I had the reverse culture shock for sure, but I never felt
Really?
like I was out of my own. And it's because I was never out on my own trying to figure something out. I always had,
Mm,
somebody that I met playing a sport to help me out with something. I had somebody that I met from my flat who came out to an event with the rugby team to have a good time. Like the rugby team was like my home base. And we had practices every week and we had a few games. And, am I good at rugby? I'm not really sure if I would say that, but it was just being a part of the team that fended off any sentiment of, oh, I'm so nervous about being abroad. I got there and I was nervous for the first 2 days that I didn't have the rugby team. And after that, it was smooth sailing.
wow. Okay. So would that be like your number one tip for like fighting any type of culture shock, just like instantly trying to be a part of a group and finding like friends there?
Yes. My number one tip would be to join a club organization at university. And
Yeah.
if you're going to like one of those programs that's an internship, trying to find a group of friends and making a group quickly. And whether they're Americans or they're from Spain or they're from France and you're all in Italy, just making a group and trying to organize, right? We're going to go out a couple of times a week. We're going to study together to
Mhm.
create a consistent group. Cause I think that's the biggest thing is just having that consistent group of friends.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good tip. So kind of on that line, were there any moments where you felt like you were pushed out of your comfort zone?
Oh, yeah. And those were some of the most fun moments ever. There was one time well, on my one trip that I made to Ireland. I was so Wales is not very far from Ireland, but you had to take a ferry to get there.
Mm,
And the ferries to Dublin all go out of Holyhead, which is in the north of Wales on the island of Anglesey. And it's like a 30-minute train ride, maybe 20-minute train ride from Bangor to Holyhead. But the day that I was going to um, Dublin, a massive storm came through
ooh.
and it blew the roof off of a train station in Chester and it was turning over buses that were like supposed to be taking people places. So they shut down all travel. And in about 10 minutes, I had to figure out, all right, am I going to get on this boat to Holyhead or figure out how to get to Holyhead because I'm
Yeah.
still 45 minutes away? Or am I just going to let the trip go? And I was with another flatmate of mine from Colorado, and we decided, no, we're going to try and make this happen. And so it was navigating the Welsh train system and the Welsh taxi services and trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to get there? And we ended up that night, we made our ferry and we ended up at our hostel, and it was one of the coolest trips I've ever been on. Was going to Dublin and just walking around aimlessly and running into a beautiful library and everything else. But uh it's when things kind of go wrong in that last moment, trying to flip and still make it happen
Mhm.
while you're in this foreign country. I definitely felt out of the water, out of like, okay, I don't know how to make any of this work here, but
Around,
uh,
yeah.
it was pretty phenomenal.
That's really well said. Yeah, definitely. Because I feel like there's a lot you can learn about yourself in terms of resilience and like that inner strength when you are put in those really tough situations where you don't know if you're gonna like make it out of it or are you gonna
Hmm.
get home.
And I think the thing is that I learned from that, no matter how tough it is, you should try and see it out. You should
Mm,
try and see out that experience because I got a whole story about, trying to finagle my way on two different taxis because I didn't communicate correctly because one guy only spoke Welsh on the
mm.
taxi service and one guy was bilingual but not great. So it was like, I got to have that be part of my double experience, which wouldn't have happened had I said, nah, it's gonna be too hard to figure it out.
Yeah. That's very true. Yeah. Now that's a great story that you always have with you.
Hmm.
So kind of with traveling, just the UK, but also to like different places in general, how did you adjust to like a different currency?
Yes. One thing that I regret is not getting a credit card, um, or applying for one beforehand
Mhm.
because I went ahead and used my debit card, which you can do. You can,
With an
places will
American
take
bank?
it. I'm sorry.
Sorry, with an American bank, like your
An
home?
American bank, yes, yes. I used an American bank debit card, and if you're there for more than a regular term, I'd invest in a bank account abroad and put your money in that bank account. But if you're not, it may not be worth it. Just get a credit card to make those transactions. But the thing about using your U.S. debit card, you can do that, but there are a plethora of surcharges that come along with it,
Yeah.
and those surcharges came back to bite me, and I regret not getting a credit card before, or at least applying and trying to get one.
Yeah.
Because that way you wouldn't have to face those surcharges. You wouldn't have to sign for every single transaction, because with a U.S. debit card
Oh,
abroad, you have to sign for every transaction. So
oh, because they think that like it could be someone else who's spending. Yeah.
exactly. You have to prove your identity. And the same thing goes for IDs. If you are abroad and you're of age and you're going out to the pub, or you're going to the grocery store, you have to prove, that you're of age, and they won't take US driver's license in most places
Hmm.
because it's used as a fake very often. So you have to bring your passport to the grocery store in particular if you're trying to buy alcohol there, or if you're going to the pub. Generally, they will take your U.S. driver's license, but there are some places that won't. So if you're going to a club or out clubbing, it may be dangerous, but almost may be necessary to take another form of ID.
Yeah. Did you take a picture of your passport? Because I mean, I like that I did, but I know I'm personally like weary of carrying my passport into places like that.
Yes, I had multiple pictures. My family had pictures back home. Everyone had a version of it, and
Okay.
but I really did. I was really frustrated a couple of times. And I'd go to the grocery store, and even to buy energy drinks. In the UK, you had to prove that you're of age to buy that drink.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
um that I think they have an age range to be 16. I think you have to prove you're like of that age. And
Okay.
I don't know how they didn't think I was 16, but they wouldn't accept my US driver's license. So I
Oh
ran into
no,
that problem a handful of times.
it's kind of annoying, but I guess it's a good system. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and then you kind of mentioned this, but I was curious. So were there any like COVID costs? Because you mentioned the cost of like, bank fees. So were there any kind of unexpected financial costs as a result of COVID?
Maybe not financial costs, but opportunity costs for sure.
Hmm.
I did not get to travel to mainland Europe
Mm,
because it would have been too difficult to figure out the quarantine times
yeah.
and the necessary forms for whatever country I ended up in at the time. Now, some people figured it out, and props to them. But my program, I went through Arcadia abroad to Banga, and my program advised us not to worry about trying to get to mainland Europe because a lot of countries had different variations of COVID policy. Ireland was an exception because they went with the same policies that the UK did, because they worked together on their COVID task force, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So the costs weren't necessarily mounting in dollars,
Mhm.
but in what I could do, and in the opportunities that were presented to me. So I never saw mainland Europe, but I saw the UK and Ireland, and that was incredible in itself.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned that actually, because a lot of my friends and I were planning to study abroad next spring, and a lot of us are going to like I'm going to China, and they have very strict policies. Yeah,
Ooh,
so
that's
I know that
cool.
I'll. It is cool, but I'll probably be in a hotel for like over a week just quarantining. So I like that
Hmm.
you mentioned that opportunity cost because different places do have different
Hmm.
policies in this post, but not yet post COVID world.
Right. And one thing that is cool, that an anecdote that I have, when I was abroad, I got my booster
Mm.
for COVID, and I went to a service in London to get my booster, and I was with a friend from rugby, and he, walked in and got his booster, and I was right behind him. And I sat down at the table, and they asked me for my NHS ID number. I said, I'm an abroad student. I don't have an ID number for the NHS. I don't have like a residence because my residence has ended. And they were putting things in the computer, nothing was working, and they decided, well, let me just try and put you in as a homeless person and see if that goes through. And
Okay,
it did. It worked perfectly. So in the NHS, I'm listed as someone who's homeless.
that's so
um,
funny.
but I have my NHS booster card, which I think is pretty cool.
That's great. Yeah. That's such a funny story, actually. Yeah. Um, Oh yeah, so this was another question kind of you mentioned with the bank fees. Did you have any like cell phone issues, or did you get a SIM card or use
Mm,
like like WeChat or WhatsApp to communicate with family and friends from home?
yes, I used WhatsApp to communicate with home. WhatsApp was clutch in that way. For communication abroad, most programs will require you to have a number so they can communicate with you at any moment.
Hmm.
Uh, so I went ahead and what I did was I went through giffgaff and I got a SIM card and I put that SIM card in my phone. Now, one thing that was nice is that the program that I went through, Arcadia Abroad Bangor University, they used Unikit, which is like a service to give students bedding and kitchenette supplies.
Oh,
And I was given a free SIM card through that service. And then I just had to pay as I needed. It was a pay as you go SIM card.
that's
And that
nice.
was really handy because instead of having all these charges all the time or paying a really big fee and not using really all of the data or all of the texting, I was able to just pay as I went on a SIM card that was provided to me through my abroad program. So I think it's trying to finesse the system a little bit and finding those kind of cheaper avenues. And most abroad programs will provide you with the services that are most convenient that you might need.
That's good to hear. Yeah, because I know some people will use like a Verizon International plan, or they'll get like a like flip phone. So it's interesting to hear that like your program kind of helped you out there. Do you feel like they offered a lot of really good support in general, like Arcadia?
Arcadia provided a lot of support, and I never felt like I didn't have someone I could talk to if I ran into trouble. I was supposed to have a meeting while I was in Wales with my advisor. He was supposed to come up, and that storm, actually, the storm Arwen that
No.
almost ruined my Dublin plans. Blocked him from coming to see me too. So it was kind of sad. I never actually got to meet anyone from Arcadia abroad in person. It was all over Zoom, all online. But it was just enough. It was just fine. I would say if you are in the actual location that your abroad provider is, they'll have a lot more hands-on interactive things for you. I
Mm,
was up in Wales, so it was a bit inconvenient for me to get to London, multiple times to
yeah.
um, be a part of those programs. It's like a 5-hour train journey. It's a little bit expensive to train to London, but in London, they had tea for everybody. They would take people on trips to Oxford, take people on trips to Liverpool, and those looked really awesome. But because I was so far away, I kind of just stayed back and stayed with the rugby team and stayed with my flat, and it worked out amazing for me. But if you are someone who kind of wants more structure, wants more advice, the
Mhm.
abroad programs will give that to you 100%.
Okay, that's really good to hear. Yeah. Oh, and then kind of off that line, like how prepared did you feel for this experience? Did the off-campus studies office do anything through like the, pre-going kind of tests and little webinars that we have to take, or was there a class here at Denison that you feel like prepared you?
Mm. I think global tools, all the modules
Mhm.
should be taken seriously because they really did prepare me. They
Right.
did. They prepared me for the finite things about traveling abroad. They prepared me for the UK specifically, and how to navigate my program and how to navigate my program effectively. I also think that the program provided a lot of things that were UK specific and were a bit more centric to Bangor itself or
Mhm.
centric to training in London itself, which were really helpful when I got there. But I would say overall, those things should be taken seriously by students and not just done to get the check marks done so they can go abroad, but
Right.
actually pay attention to them. Uh, and then in terms of classes, I took a class for my global health major, just global health 101, that gave me the chance to actually look at healthcare abroad and make a comparison to the United States. And then when I got to the UK, I learned about the NHS and I did a comparative health and welfare class about the NHS, about Senegal, and about the US. And my writing was, if not better way accelerated than most of the people who are in my program. And I
Mm.
think Denison just does a really great job of preparing students to write those papers. And I never once felt like I don't know how to write a paper for a UK professor. I don't know what I'm doing. I just was confident in my abilities that my professors have taught me to discern and make those arguments coherent. And I think if you are worried about academics abroad, knowing that Denison prepares you for those academics at any level is true. Because when I got to Bangor University, I never once felt like, oh man, I don't know how to do this academic thing in this UK context.
That's great to hear, because I feel like we do a lot of writing here. Yes, that's the joy of a liberal arts education, but it's great to hear that, all the hard work that we're putting in at Denison really does pay off in other settings, and also I'm sure postgraduate too.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any like favorite classes? You mentioned one, but did you take any other classes?
My favorite class, hands down, was exercise physiology. I got to be in an exercise lab where they did tests on how much oxygen people breathe when they exercise and how much lactate they produce, in a lab where professional soccer players would come and actually get their numbers tested. And so I got to see the numbers of all these different players that I have watched on TV before, and I got
That's
to
so
see
cool.
the equipment, and I actually got to be tested a couple of times. So I know how much power I can produce in 6 seconds, right? I know how much power I produce on a vertical jump. And it was very major specific to health and exercise sports studies. But it was also just one of those unique classes that, despite Denison having all the resources and incredible things that they offer, just unique to Bangor was
Mhm.
having such a renowned physical laboratory that students can just come take part in. So the classes were all phenomenal, but that one in particular had me excited to come back every single time.
Oh, that sounds like such a cool class, honestly.
Mm-hmm. And it's crazy, like, it's not like all the athletes are all plastered all over the walls or anything. It's just like you look at an Excel spreadsheet and you see his name. It's like, wait, that guy was like on TV last week. I watched him play in this game. Like, it was just so cool.
Just casually listed.
Just casually listed, exactly.
Okay. And then I have two more questions. So, a big one is, what was like a big like social lesson that you feel like you learned as a result of the trip, looking back now? Or you could also think of it as like, what do you wish you knew before going?
I wish I knew that settling in back to Denison is not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. I think that going abroad, you have all this excitement. So settling in there, if you make the right connections and you do it quickly, like joining a rugby team, it works. It works great. But then you come back to Denison, and sometimes it is just a bit difficult because you wish you were being able to go out to the pub that you went to so many times, or you wish you had that one cafe that had this sweet view over this really unique space that it just doesn't exist in Granville, Ohio.
Yeah.
And Denison has its own charms and its own uniqueness, but it doesn't have the same history as a university might have abroad, or doesn't have the same history as a location might have abroad. So I think settling back into Denison, if I had known it's not going to be easy, you're going to have to get over some culture shock. You're going to have to get over some reevaluating Denison. I would have settled in maybe a bit faster, maybe come to terms with myself a bit quicker of I am in Ohio, and this is okay, and I can always go back abroad. But I think for some people that transition is easy and they snap into it, and for others that transition back is a bit harder. And for me, it was a bit harder. Took a little bit more focus, but I'm thrilled to be back now. But those first couple of weeks, I definitely missed Bangor.
I mean, how could you not? Denison has its charms, like you said, but still, I'm sure your location was really, really beautiful. So I can only imagine.
Right. And it's like, with being a part of the rugby team, they became such a focal point of all of my everyday interactions abroad, that coming back and not having them at the at a university was a really odd change. And I'm a part of a fraternity here, and I do club sports here. I actually joined the rugby team when I got back, and I do keep carrying it on. And I'm in DCGA, so I'm part of these clubs and organizations that are really welcoming and vibrant communities. But it was just a little bit different, and it was a difference that I had to not necessarily suck up and get over, but recognize, acknowledge, and reflect on and move past.
Yeah, that's good to say. Yeah, because I know some people experience more of that reverse culture shock, kind of like you said you did, and others just experience straight up culture shock when they go into that new place. And it definitely happens to all of us, and it's just how do we get past it and navigate what's important. Yeah. Okay, well, for the last and final question, is there anything that I think I haven't asked you that you feel like you would like to share about your journey or give advice to, whether that's for sophomores who are planning, freshmen who are looking, or even prospective students, or really just anyone that you feel like is really important?
Let me try and think of like the biggest thing I can think of.
Yeah, big takeaway.
I think if you are considering study abroad, if you are considering a new Denison experience, if you're considering a new university experience altogether, you should absolutely study abroad. And the reason I say new experience altogether is because I was someone who was thinking about transferring, and I was thinking about transferring abroad. And I thought, well, let me study abroad first, see what it's like being at a university abroad, and then move from there. And I studied abroad. And there was that one moment when I was in Wales when I realized, man, I miss Denison so much. I miss the way the students interact. I miss the student professor connection, because there are, like I said, there's a charm about being abroad, there's a charm about Denison, and there are beautiful things about being at another university in this awesome location. And then there are things that Denison has that just are so unique and so specific to Denison. And I found that I was missing those things and those people a lot more than I had the desire to make my study abroad permanent. And I felt, okay, yeah, I'm excited and ready to come back. Sure, as I mentioned, I had some culture shock when I came back, but I couldn't, the moment I made the change, I couldn't imagine myself not going back. So I think Denison has this way of running you to your bare bones and making you work as hard as you can to grow you and mature you as an academic and as a person. And it can be exhausting and you want to break from it, but it also was really enticing and exciting, and it will bring you right back in. So I think my biggest advice to any prospective student, any prospective study abroad applicant, is to do it. Apply, go for it, try for it. They have financial resources that can help you make it happen. They have scholarships. They have all the planning you need in the world. Try, because it is just one of the most incredible experiences you can possibly have, and it can really actually help you understand the importance of the university you're at and the value of your home university.
That's great. Yeah, that's the Denison difference, actually.
That's the Denison difference.
Yeah, I know I've talked to a lot of people who went abroad, or even coming like as sophomores like myself, they like weren't sure about Denison just because we didn't get to visit. And then as we've been here, it's just been like, oh my gosh, Denison is such a special place. I can't imagine being anywhere else. And so that's such a beautiful way to put it.
Right.
And
there was very specifically, there was one day when I was walking home from my sport physiology class, the lab, and I was going up to the rugby field, which is up a hill. And I was walking on this path to get up the hill. And for just a half a second, it felt like I was walking from Mitchell up to Aquad. And it was like this warm feeling of like, I really felt at home And it was both good to feel at home while abroad. And it was good to think about that dreadful walk up that big long hill and think, oh, that sounds nice today. So that was a really exciting moment that I had. Just, doing things that I did abroad, but totally thinking about Denison.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.